completed till the gaseous cycle. Now let us begin with the sedimentary cycle. In this particular cycle, we are going to talk about the sulfur cycle first of all. Sulfur. Sulfur is an element important to ecosystem and the climate. The majority of sulfur is stored underground. So sulfur is stored majorly in the underground. For example, under the ocean or in the rocks. It also occurs naturally in places like swamp. What is swamp? It is a place where organisms have decomposed. So in that particular decomposed area in swamp, we will find out the sulfur. Then also in volcanoes, so we can find out sulfur underground, that is in ocean or rock, or else in swamp or in volcano. Human add excess sulfur into this cycle usually through atmospheric pollution caused by fossil fuel combustion. For example, in vehicle pollution, we can find out the excess sulfur release into the air. Now steps of sulfur cycle. So what are the steps? First, as the rocks are worn down by erosion, they release sulfur that was once stored, becoming sulfate once it touches the air. So sulfur are released from the rocks. They will become sulfate after it touches the air. Now plant absorb this sulfur through photosynthesis and makes this sulfur organic. Okay. So sulfur are being converted into sulfate, which is being absorbed by plants during photosynthesis. Then that particular compound will become organic. Now, animals, specifically herbivores, omnivores, consume the sulfur when they eat the plant. So even animals consume sulfur. Sulfur moves through food chain as secondary consumer and tertiary consumer eat the primary consumer. So sulfur, it is consumed both by plants and animals. They move in the food chain, even in the secondary and tertiary consumers. When animals and plants die, the sulfur dissipates into the atmosphere as sulfate also through the body of decomposes. So after plants and animals die, the sulfur again it goes back into the atmosphere as sulfate. How? With the help of decomposers. The sulfur in the atmosphere is returned to the soil and water cycle when it rains. So it again is recycled into the atmosphere and it also goes back to soil and water. So this is that particular sulfur cycle. Now the next cycle is about the phosphorus cycle. So what is phosphorus? Phosphorus is an essential nutrient for animals and plants. It plays a critical role in cell development. So phosphorus is important for cell development in plants and animals and is a key component of molecules that store energy such as ATP, adenosine triphosphate, DNA and lipids. Lipids are nothing but they are the fats and also oils. So it will help in storing the energy and also in cell development. Insufficient phosphorus in the soil can result in decreased crop yield. So that is why we use the fertilizer NPK, right? So phosphorus is very important for crop yield. Here are the key steps of the phosphorus cycle. What is that? Over the time, rain and weathering causes rocks to release phosphate ion and other minerals. So here phosphate ions are being released from the rock and this inorganic phosphate is then distributed in soil and water. Plants take up the inorganic phosphate from the soil. The plant may then be consumed by animals. Once in the plants or animal, the phosphate is incorporated into organic molecules such as DNA. When the plant or animal dies, it decays and the organic phosphate is returned to the soil. So, in the soil, it is in the form of inorganic phosphate form. This is consumed by plants. plants are further consumed by animals. Now they are converted into organic form. Once they die, they will again decay and return to the soil. So the cycle continues this way. Within the soil, organic forms of phosphate can be made available to the plants. Even in the soil itself, organic form of phosphate can be made available. How? With the help of bacteria that will break down the organic matter into inorganic form of phosphorus. So it will break down organic to inorganic and inorganic to organic, both the way. This is known as mineralization. Breaking down of organic matter into inorganic form is called mineralization, which is done by bacteria. Phosphorus in soil can end up in waterways and eventually ocean. So from soil it will reach the waterway and even it will eventually reach the ocean. When there, it can be incorporated into sediments over time. This is the phosphorus cycle. Now, next we will begin with the aquatic ecosystem concept. So, what is this particular ecosystem? Ecosystem consisting of water as a main habitat is known as aquatic ecosystem. In terrestrial ecosystem, we have land. Similarly, in aquatic, we have water as the main habitat. The classification based on salt concentration as follows. First one is freshwater ecosystem. Here it has 5 pp. For example, lake, pond, spring, stream, rivers, these are the freshwater ecosystem. Then the next one is marine ecosystem, equal to sea level, approximately 35. In case of freshwater, it is 5 ppt. Whereas in case of marine, that is ocean, it reaches up to 35 ppt. And the next one is brackish water ecosystem. Here it is between the ppt is between the freshwater and marine. In freshwater we have 5 ppt, and in marine we have 35 ppt. So in between it is called brackish water ecosystem. This include estuary, salt marshes, mangrove swamp, etc. Now these are the zones of aquatic ecosystem. Like if we zoom in, we can find out that the first few zone or the area is neritic, and if we go further, it is called oceanic. And even here we have sublittoral, bathyal, abyssal, huddle, etc. Huddle is the most saline region. And even here we have apalagic, then bathypelagic, mesopelagic, epipelagic, pelagic. So these are some of the various zones of aquatic ecosystem. Now we'll talk about the aquatic organism. These are various zones. Now what are the organism? Classification of zone of occurrence and their ability to cross the zone. First one being Newton, that rest or swim on the surface. Example, water strider. They swim on the surface, like here. They swim on surface, they are Newton. Next one is periphyton. Who are periphyton? They are attached or clinging to other plants or any other surface. Example, algae. If we have some plants here, and some algae will cling onto it, it is called periphyton. Example being algae. Then the next one is plankton, that float on the surface of the water. Example, phytoplankton like algae or zooplankton like rotifer. So algae and rotifers are the plankton. They are the plants that float on the surface. Then the next organism is called nekton, that swim on the surface. Example, fish. If something swims on the surface, it is called nekton. Example, fish. Then benthos, that are attached to the bottom segment. If something lives in the bottom area, it is called benthos. Example, seagrass. So here we have a small image also. Seagrass we can see here, benthos. Then periphyton lives here. This is nekton. Then these are the zooplankton and phytoplankton, and these are newston. They float or rest on the surface. So these were the various aquatic organisms and their zone of occurrence, which is just now. Now the next topic is about the factors limiting the productivity of aquatic life. So what are the factors which are limiting their productivity? For example, sunlight. Sunlight is not reachable in the deeper areas of water. So plants seeking sunlight cannot grow well there. Then dissolved oxygen is important for many organisms. Then transparency in water. If some water is being affected by oil spill or something, then it will affect the organism. Then temperature also plays an important role. These are some of the factors limiting their productivity. First, sunlight. It is divided into two zones, like photic zone and aphotic zone. A means not, like sunlight will not reach that particular zone. Layer where sunlight penetrates and photosynthesis can take place. Aphotic zone, or the layer where sunlight penetration is too low and no photosynthesis, but respiration can take place because oxygen might be available there. Then the next factor is dissolved oxygen. Fresh water will have 10 ppm of oxygen. Oxygen enters through water, air water interferes, and photosynthesis. During photosynthesis and also during air water interface, oxygen enters the water. In fresh water, we will have 10 ppm, that is parts per molecule. It's influenced by temperature, warm water. Here we will have less oxygen, and if temperature and the water becomes cooler, comparatively less warmer, then there will be more oxygen. If it falls to 5 ppm and or below, then organism will die. So we'll need at least 10, just like the fresh water. If it falls below 5, then the organism will die. Then the next factor is transparency. This is the turbidity because of suspended particulate matter like clay or silt. It can limit the productivity of life. For example, the water must be transparent enough for the sunlight to reach and other things to air or water to reach that particular organism. Contaminants like clay and silt can limit its productivity. Then the next factor is temperature. Water has higher specific heat than air. So the specific heat capacity of water is higher. So temperature change will be slower. Temperature fluctuation can be fatal to aquatic organisms because it may become difficult for them to adapt, right? So these are some of the factors. Now next topic is about the aging of lakes. How lakes become like aged one. First step is oligotrophic lake, which are young. So young lakes are like this. Then it will become mesotrophic lake, which are middle aged. It became comparatively narrower and smaller in size. So eutotrophic lake, when it becomes old, the lake size further decreases. Then lakes completely filled in, that is died. So and there is no visible sign of lake here. So this is called aging of lake. Now the topic is eutrophication. Now let us look about the causes, effect and mitigation. Eutrophication means if this is a lake and something which, if it algal bloom or something, if it affects the penetration of sunlight and other various components, it will cause eutrophication. So eutrophication is ecosystem response in addition to artificial or natural substance, mainly phosphate, through detergents and fertilizer or sewage to an ecosystem. So when things like this detergent or fertilizer, if it fills up the lake, it will add to more such eutrophication process. How can we identify the eutrophication? Physical identification. Can see excess growth of green algae. Yeah, algae will be there on the surface due to enrichment of aquatic system by the adding of nutrient. Too much of, if we are adding too much of like fertilizer or something in the nearby agri field, and that is washed down by river or something into this particular lake or pond, and this will cause rise to green algae, and this is how eutrophication develops. Now, what is the reason? Bleaching of phosphate and nitrate containing fertilizers and agri land into the lakes and rivers, as we discussed now. This is the picture of eutrophication. We can see here. Sediments from the land, it blocks the sunlight. This is how. Now, what will happen? This will result in algal bloom, that is unsustainable population explosion due to nutrient enrichment. Because of excess of nutrients like phosphate and nitrogen, it will block the lake itself with algal bloom. Then light penetration, this will be restricted too. It will also result in oxygen depletion, so resulting in no or less photosynthesis, since decomposition of the dead algae uses more oxygen, and the oxygen for further organism and other organism will be reduced, right? So oxygen depletion, this process result in suffocation and death of aquatic animals. Then what are the other effect? New anaerobic condition like Clostridium botulinum that produces toxin come up in this condition. So bacterial invasion might also further increase, and it will create an anaerobic condition like without oxygen. There are certain microorganisms, they can survive without oxygen. Their population will increase. Then degradation of aquatic ecosystem might happen. So eutrophication can be natural or it can even be made man-made. Wastewater effluent, runoff from agriculture, these are the man-made reasons. Now what are the effects? It will cause change in ecosystem, that is formation of detritus layer. Since algal bloom die and settle at the bottom, it will result in marshy land. Then decreased biodiversity. Algal bloom, it will decrease the oxygen availability and it will reduce the penetration of sunlight. Then new species invasion. Since aerobic condition give way to anaerobic condition, new species like bacteria, it will create anaerobic condition, right? It might create new species invasion. Biodiversity has already decreased and the ecosystem might change. Then toxicity will be there. Neuro and hepatotoxin, oxygen, loss of coral reef, change in color of water, increase in gelatinous zooplankton, which are toxic. So toxicity might also increase. Now mitigation. How can we reduce this particular eutrophication process and their effect? First we have to do buffering. Then we have to reduce the erosion and also adoption of organic farming. Then sewage treatment. So these are some of the mitigation steps. Now measurement of quality of water. How can we measure? With the help of amount of dissolved oxygen. It refers to the level of free and non-compound oxygen. Oxygen available in the free state present in water or other liquid is called dissolved oxygen. Oxygen enters the water by direct absorption from the atmosphere by rapid movement or as waste product of plant photosynthesis. Water temperature and the volume of moving water and affect dissolved oxygen level. Oxygen dissolves easier in cooler water than the warmer water. So water temperature and the volume of moving water can affect the dissolved oxygen. So oxygen can easily dissolve in cooler water. So the warming of temperature might affect the oxygen content. Then presence of organic and inorganic waste in water decreases the dissolved oxygen content of the water. So organic, inorganic waste, they also have to be filtered and taken out. Water having DO content, that is dissolved oxygen content, below 8 mg per liter, milligram per liter, may be considered as contaminated. So it must be greater than 8 dissolved oxygen. Water having dissolved oxygen content below 4 mg per liter is considered to be highly polluted. Even 8 itself is considered as polluted. If it is less than 4, then it's called highly polluted, right? We must have more than 8 milligram per liter of dissolved oxygen. Now let's look into the difference between biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. These are the parameters, and it is about the BOD and COD. It's not cash on delivery, it's chemical oxygen demand. First, the definition. Measurement of consumed oxygen by the aquatic microorganism to decompose or oxidize organic matter. This is biological oxygen demand, which is the amount of oxygen required by aquatic organism. The requirement of dissolved oxygen for the oxidation of organic and inorganic constituents or both. If this is used for oxidation purpose, then it's called chemical oxygen demand. If it is used for their survival, if it is consumed by them, then it is called BOD. So here it is for decomposition or oxidation, and here it's for oxidation. Then breaking down of organic matter. Here it is done by aerobic microorganism, and here it is done by chemical reagent. Now complete breakdown of pollutant, it does not happen, whereas here it happens. Breaking down of material. Here organic matter alone breaks down. Here both organic and inorganic material breaks down. That is what we saw here, right? Both of the things are being oxidized and they can be broken down. Then strong oxidizing reagent. No. Here yes, it is a strong oxidizing reagent. Time it takes only few days, approximately 5 days, whereas it takes only few hours to complete. Here its value is lower than COD, whereas COD has higher value than BOD. So these are some of the difference between BOD and COD. Thank you.